Alrighty, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome. I'm excited to have a conversation with you. We're going to talk through the Sourcegraph 3.15 release and go through all of the amazing features that we just added. I'm Christina. I'm the product manager at Sourcegraph, and I have Byung on the line here to help talk about some of our features. Byung, can you introduce yourself? I can't seem to unmute you. I'm trying.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Byung. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Sourcegraph. And should I just dive into some of the features?
I'll get kicked off on it. I just wanted you to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah. Hey everyone.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So the first thing that I wanted to also give a little plug about that I'm really excited about is we released a children's book this morning. So I'm super excited and have been so impressed at what our team was able to put together. It was really a collaborative effort from everyone across the company, engineers, marketing, sales, everyone contributing to make this thing happen. And it is just absolutely delightful. And so I hope you all take a look and download that and share that with your kids and enjoy it as much as I have. And yeah, all right, let's jump into 3.15. So Sourcegraph 3.15 has a lot of great features, and the one that I'm most excited about is the fact that we have removed the private beta from campaigns, which means that it's still in beta, but campaigns are now available for general use. Campaigns, as a reminder, are the way in Sourcegraph that you can make large-scale code changes across all of your code inside of your Sourcegraph instance. This is super helpful if you're doing things like running go mod tidy and you want to make sure all of your Go files are properly formatted, or if you want to search and find credentials that have been leaked inside of your code. So campaigns are a thing that are available. We're really excited to get feedback and have people test this out. We've made a lot of great improvements. You'll be able to see that on sourcegraph.com. With a lot more information. Right now, it's not available on sourcegraph.com because it's only available to site admins. But you can set up your own private instance. And so we have some getting started steps here for you if you want to give that a shot. Set up your private instance, add your repositories, and you can enable campaigns and get started trying that out. So I highly encourage you, take a look at this awesome video demoing running a Go format over all of your repositories, and yeah, check it out. So an example of what it looks like once it's been enabled is this is an example of the campaigns page. We see 4 different campaigns that have been created here. And so clicking into that, oh, that's a testing one. Long-term manual, okay, here we go. So this is the kind of thing that you can see where you're gonna see a burn up or a burn down chart as you're tracking changes across lots of repositories. You can see the status of all of those things. We've got nice GitHub labels here. You can see the status of some of these that have been merged. Some of them are pending review. Some of them that have actually had changes requested, and more. So all of that information kind of combined in one place for you to be able to make sure all of these changes get rolled out across your organization. Cool. So moving on, the next thing is, last time when I met with everyone for the 3.14 release, we talked about how we added faster syncing of repository permissions for Bitbucket Server and GitLab. In 3.15, this release, we added it for GitHub as well. So if you're using one of your code hosts for authorization of repository permissions, we have made that much more performant at scale. So this should be able to be enabled, and it will just work, and things will be much faster for those who were previously encountering some slowness if they had lots of repositories and lots of permissions that needed to be synced each time. Cool. I'll pause. Any questions? I'm on a roll. No questions. All right, I'll keep going. So this next one is an experimental feature right now, but it's one that I'm really looking forward to having as a full-fledged feature inside of Sourcegraph. This is the ability to actually run and/or queries from your Sourcegraph search. So if you want to, for example, find files that contain 2 references to 2 different function calls, you can now do this. This is experimental in that it's a new feature. We're still figuring out the complexities and the scalability of it. You can enable it for your instance in the site configuration settings. So we're really excited to get feedback on this. Here's an example on sourcegraph.com of an and/or query where you can see we're looking for files that contain both conf.get and log15 error. And so you can see all of these files that return results have both of those things inside. We can also do that with the or query, which would return more places where this shows up. And the only requirement is that one of them is present within the file. An important thing to note here is that this only applies to file contents currently. You cannot apply this to the filter scope. What that means is that you cannot nest and/or queries using the repository file language filters. All of those filters are applied at the top level, and we're only going to look at what your query contents are specifying here. That ability to have and or apply to the entire scope of the query is coming soon. We're working on it. I'm really excited for that feature, but not quite there yet. We're still working on it. So if you have feedback as you're trying this out, please send it our way. We would love to hear from you. Oops, and I have to pop back to my blog. Here we go. Oops. Alrighty. Cool. The next one up is improved observability. Byung, you want to talk about this
one? Yes, definitely. Actually, I shared my screen briefly.
Not at all.
Okay, cool.
I'll stop share. And then should we make sure you have those permissions?
Oh, yes. It's host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'll make you co-host.
Cool.
Try again.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
It's tiny, but yes. Can you zoom in a bit?
Yes. Is that better?
Yeah,
that's
cool. Good.
So one of the sets of features that we shipped in the latest release are specifically targeted at site administrators. So these are people who are running and managing their own Sourcegraph instances. So thank you, first of all, to those people for running and managing your own Sourcegraph instance. There's a lot of challenges that go into managing that, as there are with managing any piece of software. And we specifically wanted to provide better tools for people who are responsible for maintaining the overall health of the instance to go in and monitor the health of the instance and also debug issues when they arise. So one of the things, one of the challenges that often comes up when you're a site administrator is, let's say you've installed Sourcegraph, you got it up and running, everything works great, search is super fast, your team is raving about it, they love you because you've given them this awesome tool. But one day someone comes to you and says, hey, site admin, I did this search in Sourcegraph and it was slow. What can you do about that? So first off, you should reach out to Sourcegraph support because we are here to help everyone who's running a Sourcegraph instance do so effectively. But oftentimes, up until this release, it was hard to determine exactly what information would be valuable to report. And starting in this iteration, there's a really powerful new tool that you can use as a site admin or anyone with a site admin permissions on the system to go and debug performance issues and also relay that information back to Sourcegraph. So let's say, the search that I've done is really slow. It's fast on this instance because most of our searches have to be fast, but let's just say on your particular instance, this was slow. It was causing high amount of latency. So what could you do then? So we integrated a new tool called Jaeger into Sourcegraph. And Jaeger is a distributed tracing tool. And what that means is it breaks down where a particular request is taking a lot of time. So what's neat about this is you can actually go and look into any search request, or really any HTTP request that Sourcegraph issues. And you can look up this trace ID. I realize this is kind of small. So there's this xtrace header that's included on all Sourcegraph requests to the backend. And you can pop over to this Jaeger UI and you can look up the, slight bug. You can look up the trace ID that corresponds. Okay, I'm gonna pop over to this. Seems like there's a bug there, but you can look up the trace ID that corresponds to that request and instantly see a breakdown of where the request is spending time. So here it looks like, this particular zook.search request is taking up a lot of time. I can click into that and get metadata about that. And then I can relay all this information to Sourcegraph so that we know exactly, which service is the bottleneck in that request. So this is a really powerful tool, provides distributed tracing capabilities to every Sourcegraph site admin. In addition to that, we've shipped much better alerting and observability in the form of better alerts. So in the Grafana instance that ships with every Sourcegraph instance, Grafana is a dashboarding system for keeping track of metrics and overall instance health. You can now configure alerts for the overall health of every important service that makes up Sourcegraph. So site admins, we highly encourage you to do that. That will essentially give you an alert every time there's a spike in latency or some other issue that Grafana detects may be a problem for your users.
Awesome. Thank you, Byung. Cool. So moving right along, the next feature that we talked about in our blog post is the visibility filter. So this came up from a customer who wanted to be able to perform searches just on their public code. So any repositories that are their open source repositories versus I want to only perform this search on my private code. This is, code that's internal to my company. And so we added a filter which lets you scope your query to only show results from either the public or the private repositories, of course, defaulting to all, always showing you all of your search results. And so, yeah, that's a great one. That was actually a specific request having to do with campaigns. So this is where you provide a scope query. You say, how am I making a change? I only want to make changes to my private internal code versus I only want to make changes to my code that's public. I have to make sure that, all of our open source repositories are security compliant, that sort of thing. So that's a great new addition. Our getting started prompt got more context. So this was just a quick win that we wanted to put together. If I pop over here and show you, the getting started prompt for most users has this information. Previously, it did not have these drop downs. And so now we've provided additional context to help users get started and actually know what they need to do to complete the getting started process. Extensions and code intelligence is something that is really cool about Sourcegraph. So an extension is an integration to another service. So Sourcegraph extensions allow you to add things like code coverage, get extras like get blame, as you're seeing here in this GIF, code owners, you could add information about Lightstep or Sentry. It puts context about your code in your code while you're looking at it. And then our code intelligence is the language information that we show in hovers with the Go docs and the go to definition and find references. So what that looks like in a Sourcegraph search result, if I pop back up here to this nice example, where'd you go? There we go. We get these things inside the file views. And so you can go to definition, find references about your code. So this is a code intelligence hover, for example. So the change we specifically made in this release was tidying this up and how this is displayed in the browser bar and on your code host. So again, a neat thing here is that if I pop directly over to view this file in GitHub, I will get these same nice hovers and tooltips inside of GitHub, inside of GitLab, inside of Bitbucket server, whichever code host is configured. And it will keep you within that context. So what we're seeing here actually is an example of the Sentry code intelligence extension, providing a link to go look at this error inside of Sentry. And so there's lots of great information you can have and lots of different extensions you can enable. And so this was getting a bit cluttered. And so we cleaned this up, we tidied it up, we worked on making it more performant and making it more obvious when code intelligence elements were showing up in the UI. This next one is a interesting, oh, I got a question. The dashboards with campaign, oh, the campaigns dashboard. Quinn, I'll come back to that question. I'll revisit campaigns at the end. Cool. So this particular one, user event logs. So this is in response to our site administrators asking us for more information about what are, understanding audit logs, how are users using the system, what are the kinds of queries that they're running. I want to be able to have some of this tracing. This information stays on your Sourcegraph instance. It is not shared back with Sourcegraph, but it does provide a new view for you to see your own user events, like the things that we're tracking in the instance. And what your administrator can see about the actions that you're taking inside of Sourcegraph. The next one here is the experimental deterministic search results. So this again is right now with Sourcegraph search, we found that people just want search results as fast as possible. So we don't really care what kind of order they're in. We just want to see really fast results. Now this has changed over time, and there's different situations where you want very specific results, or you want results to be surfaced to you in a way that are more ranked and ordered. And so we've added in a way of creating that deterministic result where you will get the same results in the same order for your Sourcegraph search if you use the experimental scope of stable true. Again, this is still experimental in the terms of it's new. There's a lot of performance implications around it. And so we are working to make that better. And right now it has a limit of 5,000 max results. One more on the configuration side of things. In the last release, I talked about how we removed forked and archived repositories from the default searches. So we had been getting a lot of feedback from customers that, hey, I only care about the active repositories. I don't actually want to see forks and archives. If I want to search for those, I'll add that into the filter directly. That's not a big deal. We just, I don't want to have to exclude it every time I'm running a search. So we changed that default, and we had an oversight. There's actually some customers and users that some of their main repositories are archived for some reason due to whatever it is the configuration they have inside their organization. So we quickly turned that around, added back a feature so that if the organization wants to include these things by default for all of their repositories, they can just add this setting in and have that same behavior that they had before we made the change originally. And then the last one is about just getting Sourcegraph deployed more easily. As Byung talked about, we really care about what the administrators of Sourcegraph are doing and struggling with. And one of the challenges they had is, how do we deploy Sourcegraph behind a proxy? So in this case, we realized that our git fetch and git clone functions weren't inheriting those environment variables. So we made that fix, and this will help solve that particular challenge directly. We have a lot more things here down in our changelog. You can see we've done a lot of work. These are the big features that we wanted to call out and specifically talk about today. I have a few questions about campaigns. Otherwise, I would love to hear more questions from you all. I'd love to have this be more of a discussion. So the first question that Quinn asked is, can you go more into details with the admin rights within campaigns? That's a great question. So campaigns are really cool, and they're a little bit scary for administrators. If you can imagine, someone now would have the ability to open thousands of pull requests across your entire organization in every single repository at your company. That sounds a little scary. So for now, especially while Sourcegraph campaigns are in beta, we're limiting that functionality to just Sourcegraph administrators. So they can test it out. They could potentially add 1 or 2 people to test on those instances and try out campaigns. But as we're trying to figure out what kind of impact this has, both on an organization and in a coordination aspect, we have restricted in that way. There is a possibility of enabling read-only access to all of the users on your instance. Something to be aware of here is that we have not implemented repository permissions. So if you're relying on repository permissions inside of your Sourcegraph instance, those will not be enforced in any campaigns. So if someone makes a change to a repository that is supposed to be have limited access, everyone will be able to see at least those files that have been changed in the campaigns view. And so I can demonstrate that a bit here. You can actually see the change that is going into this particular diff. And so that's the information that those people would have access to. So if you're not using repository permissions, if everyone has access to everything, enabling read-only mode would be a great option for you, because then people can come in and see exactly what we're seeing here. They just would not have access to these edit and update and close buttons. They would not be able to submit change sets to be pushed to the code host. Quinn, did that answer your question? Oh, I didn't see if you were nodding or not, sorry. Thumbs up, great, thank you. All right, the next question that Quinn had was that the dashboards are awesome. What are these things? So yeah, I think what you're referring to is this chart that I'm looking at here, is that right? Yes, okay. So what we're seeing here, this is what we're calling, I guess, we've called it a manual campaign. What this is a campaign where you add in the name of your repository, you add existing pull requests into this campaign. So it gives you the ability to keep track of some things, like perhaps you have your own scripts or code change management, or things that you run or processes inside of your organization that generate pull requests already. But how do you manage those hundreds of pull requests that are changed at your organization? That can be a lot to manage. Some of the customers we talked to who are explicitly having this problem were using Google spreadsheets to make sure that all of the different pull requests were getting merged and actioned upon. It's just a big hassle. And so we want to help surface that information and make that easier for you to manage. And so in this case, this solves that direct problem where perhaps I've already created all of these pull requests on my instance, and I just need to add the path to that repository and what the pull request number is. And so by doing that, you add each one of these changes in by hand. And so what you see, the burn up chart, is actually the creation and addition of the each change as it's made progress. And then again, the burn down chart is seeing, okay, we've got 1 merged at this point in time, 1 still needs to be approved, and 3 are still needing to be reviewed. And then we see 1 got merged, and as we move forward, the different states that those are in. In addition, there's filters that you can use here to say, like, show me all the open change sets and restrict that. Let me know if there's any that have changes requested. So I can go follow up specifically with the changes that need help getting pushed over the line. I can focus on the things that I need to drive forward. I can ignore the things that are chugging along or have gotten merged already. A fun one in here is we have the check state. So if it's not passing in CI and you're surfacing that information to your code host on the pull request, you'll be able to say, hey, show me all of the ones that are failing CI. So I can ping the team and figure out what is it about this change that I've proposed that has made it so that my change is not passing their build and would block getting this merged. So again, allows you to drill down even further. Adam, you asked about if you can try campaigns on sourcegraph.com. Yeah, great question. I touched on this a little bit earlier. The answer is no, you cannot try it on sourcegraph.com because, as I mentioned previously, you need to be an administrator of the Sourcegraph instance. If you have repositories that you monitor and you use sourcegraph.com for your own repos, you can set up your own Sourcegraph instance. It's as simple as running a Docker run command and spinning that up, adding your repositories in, and enabling campaigns. And so while we don't offer it on sourcegraph.com right now, there is a path for you to be able to try that out. Cool. Any other questions? I'd love to have a discussion with any of you if you have them. No questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. It was fun going through all of this from you. I hope you learned something. Yeah, we'll stay tuned. And until next time, we'll do this again for the 3.16 release. Bye.